Hi, Emmanuel. Thank you very much for joining. My name is Victor Anyarobi. I will be your instructor, your tutor for this unit, which is Introduction to Programming. So thank you very much for joining this course. I will just give you a bit of introduction of myself. What do I do? What I teach? And then I will take you through what you expected to learn throughout this unit. And you can also give me a bit of your background. So, as I said, my name is Victor Anyarobi. I'm a tutor in computing. I have a bachelor's degree in computer science. I teach pretty much all the subject related to computing, programming, networking, artificial intelligence, information systems, and so on. So with this unit, which is Introduction to Programming, you'll be given the fundamentals of programming. We'll look into different type of programming languages, and we'll look into all the concepts that are required when it comes to creating softwares. So this is pretty much what we will cover. We have a total of 5 I think there are five sessions, and we will have also our assignment discussion where I will now present the assignment and explain what you have to do, give you a understanding of referencing, how you have to create your work in order for you not to have any sort of plagiarism, word count limit, and how to reference your work. And once this is done, you can now ask me any question if you do have any of them. So I would like to know a bit more about yourself. Can you please introduce yourself? Give me a bit of your background.
My name is Imana. I'm from Nigeria. I'm currently
What qualification have you completed before this? What is your level of understanding of programming?
I think computer level 2. Yeah, computer level 2. So I did cybersecurity, web development, some networking.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that with us. And without any further ado, let's dive into our session. So in today's session, we're going to understand how computer programming languages are used. So from the indicative content, learners should understand how computer programming is used with real life example of how computer programming supports efficiencies in manufacturing, production, and engineering. So requirements include suitable IDE, integrated development environment, which is the software that combines common developer tools into a single graphic user interface. Sources of assistance could include online forums, online blogs, tutors, working group, and code repositories. So we're now going to introduce programming. So first thing that we need to understand is that there are various types of programming languages, and each of them have their own syntax. So depending on which programming language you're going to use, all of them are going to declare the methods with their own syntax. That's why every programming language is different. So what are the most common programming languages out there? We know Python and JavaScript, which are very popular. These two are a high-level programming language, while we have other programming languages like C#, Java, and so on, which are low-level programming language, and they do work with compiler. Okay, so again, so when we look at the syntax, all of programming language will now have main methods, where the method will now where with this main method we're not going to include all of our work. So what I'm trying to explain is that every programming language work with methods and functions. This is how we can assign them computational work. So let's watch this video introduction, which will give us a better understanding of computer programming. Just 1 second. Okay. What is going on there? All right, no problem. Okay, so let me just pause the recording for 1 second. Okay, so the video explained how cool it is to learn programming. And what do we have to know is that there are various types of programs. So we have application software and system software. So application software, we do come across to them loads of times, because when it comes to application softwares, we will use them everywhere. This could be mobile application or desktop application, depending on what we're using them. Then we have system software. These are now going to include any sort of system, which could be our operating system, for example, looking into our Linux, Mac, or Windows programming. So as mentioned, low-level programming languages such as Java or C# they work with a compiler. So what does this mean? Is that our program just understands binary numbers. Computers only understand binary numbers, which are a sequence of 0 and 1, and therefore we now need a compiler. So our compiler allows us to translate English language into binary number, and the machine will now return a value to us, an output. So compilers, this is how compiler work. We have our programmer, which is going to set our computer program into English language, and by creating methods and using conditional statement, we're now going to give some set of commands to our machine, and this command will now be converted into binary number to our compiler. and now that they've been converted and given an output, this will now be returned to our users. So for us to create our very first program, we will now need our IDE, which is our integrated development environment. So our IDE is going to include our software program, our latest program. So what do we have to do? We have to head over, if we're working with Python, for instance, we head over to Python website. We'll now download the latest version of Python, which I think right now is 3.12.6. Once this is now downloaded and installed into our machine, we can also check if this is done properly from our command prompt, where we're now going to enter the we will now enter the command for us to check our Python version. So by us checking that we successfully installed the latest version, we can now head over to our IDE. So the most common IDE, Visual Studio, NetBeans, Apache, or even Eclipse. So depending on which programming language we're working with and the suitable IDE, we'll now use them to create our program. So here's an example of NetBeans, where on the right-hand side, we have our code window where we're going to type our Java source code. On the left-hand side, we have our menu. So what is our menu going to include? The menu is going to carry out the tasks such as compiling, running, and saving our program. So you basically work as a repository. And on the right bottom corner, we have our console, where is basically going to display what we've now coded. So here we have an example of different type of programming language. So we have C, which is a powerful compiled language that is closely to mapped machine code and is used to develop operating system. C++, which is an enhanced compiled language developing on C to provide classes for object-oriented programming. C#, which is a modern compiled language designed by Microsoft for the .NET framework and common language infrastructures. Java, where is a portable compiled language that is designed to run on regardless of the hardware architecture. And Python, which is a dynamic interpreted language that allows both functional object-oriented programming. So when it comes to looking at our learning outcomes, we now have to have the ability to describe how computer programming language are used to meet business needs. So what do we mean? There are different type of application out there. So if we have to look at Netflix, Facebook, Google, and so on, they're not all of them are programmed with the same programming language, neither for the front end or the back end, because each infrastructure will now require a suitable IDE. So these businesses have to now find which programming language is most suitable for them, front end or back end. So this is not a straightforward process where they just start coding and they realize which one is the best programming language. So they always start and with the continuous improvement and work, they now understand which programming language is most suitable for them. So we have examples here. We can see that Facebook, which everybody knows is an application software, is now programmed with the use of PHP for the front end and JavaScript features for the back end. Apple, which is now going to differentiate through various software application and system application. This has the variety of department, and they also have their own open source, which is called Swift. Tesla, which Tesla software engineers, all of them work with C++ and Java. Google is now also coded with Python. So in our learning outcome 2, we have to look into how computer programming language are used in different industry. So we know that when working as a startup companies, always have to choose which industry to work on. This could be either healthcare sector, graphic designing, engineering, finance, education, or so on. So it is really important that developers now understand which programming language could be more beneficial when it comes to create softwares for these industries. So we all know Python is in high demand sectors such as web application, data science, and finance. Healthcare, again, is going to include Python, where we have a lot of the use of artificial intelligence nowadays. So we know that we know that doctors are now able to perform surgeries through robotic surgeries. So by having this robot, we now incorporating artificial intelligence and machine learning. So what are the requirements for developing a computer programming code? So there are loads of requirements. We need to have readability, usability, efficient executable code, and efficient translation, and reliability and maintainability. So all of these aspects are very much summarizing concept that we will look into when we explain system development life cycles. And we're now going to look into them in more detail. So this is level 3 module. So when it comes to writing your assignment, you have your mandatory learning outcome tasks, which allows you to achieve a pass grade. But if you're trying to achieve a better grade, you can now attempt the merit tasks, such as the one I'm going to present now. So you have to, in this unit, our merit tasks is asking us to analyze the sources of assistance to use when developing computer programming code. So these assistance sources, there are various of them. There is W3 School, Free Code Academy, Stack Overflow, and so on. And these can also, we can also use online training providers such as Udemy or Coursera, or even YouTube, which is very which is a free online provider, online provider. So here we have an example of Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow is very much used by developers whenever they have bugs in the system, and they simply go into Google, type the error that they're receiving, and other developers who have already faced that issue can now help them to fix the code. So Stack Overflow is very used over developers. You can just simply ask your question and people now help you through your issues. Here we have also a distinction task where we're going to evaluate the importance of programming languages in manufacturing industry. So what do we mean by manufacturing industry? We're now going to look into fields such as engineering, robotics, automation, and artificial intelligence. So how are these fields such as engineering integrating programming language? We can see that when it comes to engineering, either is electrical engineering or so on, engineers need to have the ability to learn programming. They need to know fundamentals of programming when they may be creating a PLC, or they're now creating a circuit. Automation work very much with C and C++, where they are widely used coding languages for car manufacturers, such as Motor Industry Software Reliability Association, which have now even developed specific guidelines. So in our next session, we're going to understand the basics of programming language, features of programming environment, data type, variable, logical and arithmetical operators, conditions, explain the use of loops in programming, numbers, characters, arrays, function and method, input and output. Okay, so we'll now introduce various types of programming languages, where we find them and the purpose of them. We looked into the industry as well. Also, we have explained how to set up our environment. So we need a IDE. Obviously, we need the latest version of our computer programming installed into our machine. Now let's look into understand how to create our very first program. So computer programs pretty much do the same thing. They all do the same thing, but they have different syntax. So now we're going to look into the features of them. So we're going to explain data types, variable with and constant, keywords, such as words that can change, the immutable, logical and arithmetical operators, condition statement, numbers, functions, and methods. So we do have some key terminology. So we have to understand what's the difference between data, data type, and data structure. So when we're looking into data, we just think is a set of information where individual can store them. So as an individual, we could have different features such as our age, first name, last name, gender, whatever. All these factors are going now to create our data. Data type when it comes to programming language is a bit different, works differently, because it allows us to declare value. So our value could be integers, numbers, which are decimal numbers. Then we could have doubles, which are just not decimal. Then we also have Boolean, which allows us to check if our statement is true or false. We have long, and we have also string, which allows us to look into characters. As we can see, data type defines the operations that can be done on the data. So the meaning of that and the way values of the type can be stored. Data structure is another way for us to organize our data within our computer program. So if we're creating a very messy program that have loads of method, functions, statement, and they're all over the place, this is going to consume a lot of memory in our computer program. And not just the memory, but it's also going to slow down our program. So by having a very high amount of code placed all over the place, this is going to increase the chances of running into error, memory consumption, and also speed. So our program is going to be extremely slow. That's why we need data structure in order for us to organize and keep everything running as smooth as possible. So let's watch this video, which explain to us data type in general.
I knew I was underwater. I just didn't realize I was lit.
Okay, so looking at our presentation. Okay, from current slide. So we explained in our previous tutorial that we need IDE first of all, which have a runtime environment. This means that we can execute the program one step at a time. So our IDE is pretty much the same concept of code editor, where we can there's auto completion or code completion, where this is designed to save time while writing our code. Okay, so we have our IDE. Then we now have to explain the range of data type used in programming language. So our video gave us an introduction to them. So depending on what we need to do, as the video said, we will now have to use a specific type of specific data type. So byte, which is very small integer, it just goes through this range of value. Short, which is again small integer, and then we have int, which is a big integer. So most of the code are either done with int or a double, which is a very large, which is a really big real number. and we are allowed to work with more values. Then we have string or char depending on the programming language, and then we have Boolean, which allows us to check if the statement is true or false. So variables, we have to look at variables such as containers, where we can now store our data type into these containers. And the reason why the variable is because these values can change over the time, while constant, these are fixed value. And what do? We have to declare this. Depending on the programming language, we will have a command which allows us to define our constant. And once these values added, this is now fixed and it cannot be muted, cannot be changed over the time. So again, we have to look at them as containers. We have an example here where with a variable container, we can keep on changing data type, while with our constant container, this is going to be a fixed set of values. So again, we have also keywords. So these keywords are some word in programming language that have a specific function. So whenever we like creating a new variable, but we assign them with a name that is assigned to a keyword, this is going to crash because they already have a meaning, they already have a value in there, and this cannot be changed. Logical and arithmetical operators, such as and or, allows us to connect two or more expression with the value of a compound expression. So we can check, we can add two statements together, or we could check either one or the other. So what are conditions in computer programming? A condition is something that a computer can decide is either true or false. So we can check statement, or we can validate this statement. So true is like the computer is answering yes, and false is basically like the computer is answering no. So we have examples of conditions such as if statement, if else statement, nested if statement, and switch. So here we also have a nice video that is going to explain us the use of data types. So let's just pause this. Okay, so we had an example of how a for loop is going to work with a very simple mathematical equation. So a loop is a block of code that will repeat over and over again until one condition breaks the loop, or for example, we did not declare a condition that has to break our loop. So this allows us to create arrays or any sort of loop that, or any sort of statement that we need to repeat multiple times. So the example of loops are for loop, while loop, and do while, and they all have their own function. They all have their own way that they work. Also, I mentioned array before. So array is a set of memory location. So for example, boxes, each which is going to hold a single item of data, but while each box sharing the same name. Multidimensional arrays, where we can look at them such as metrics. These are arrays of 2 dimensions. So we're going basically to have, for example, rows and columns. So this is where we're now going to use multidimensional arrays. Here we have an example of how an array works. So our first box always refer to our number 0, which is assigned to number 0. So arrays I always declare they always start from 0 to 99, and this has to start from number 0. So this basically means that these are called zero-based indexing. Examples. So now we're going to explain functions and methods. So the reason why we have functions and methods, this is going to allow us to create object. So our object is just a set of functions that have to do a specific task. So we're just going to create a function for our program to make a specific task. So functions, also called procedures in some programming language, and methods is the most object-oriented programming language. These are, as I said, a set of instructions bonded together to achieve a specific outcome. Input and output. So these are going to be the communication between an information process system. So we're now going to we're going to have an input such as a keyboard. So we're declaring, we're going to initiate our keyboard where it allows us to enter some set of values. And our output could be our array or our multidimensional array. So in our next tutorial, we're going to understand a range of programming language, characteristic of programming languages, and common similarities. So the learner should be able to identify the most suitable programming language to use based on resources available. So the system being used has to be compatible, and the extent of the problem that they're trying to solve. So this was everything for today's session. Do you have any question?
Oh.
No question for today, guys? So if you don't have any question, I'm going to end this tutorial, then I'll see you tomorrow.
Oh.
Thank you very much, guys, for joining, and have a good day.